Hi, my name is Hector Pothier. I'm an alumnus of the Edmonton Eskimos and the St. Mary's Huskies in Halifax, Nova Scotia, and I am a cancer survivor. I would ask you all to please support Friends of Gilda Society so that no one will have to go through cancer alone. All of us have been touched by cancer, and when my sister Sandy was hit with her cancer, it shocked us all. It shocked us all because Sandy was an ex-professional athlete. She was a graduate of Dal and Victoria University and had played basketball her whole life. She coached basketball for 20 years, was involved with the Olympic basketball program, wasn't a smoker, wasn't a drinker, and yet she too got cancer, and when she found it was at 4th stage. So Sandy would have been thrilled to know that I was now involved with trying to get an organization like the Friends of Gilda Society on its feet to help those so they never have to go through cancer alone. Hector Pothier. I now live in Edmonton, Alberta. I'm a principal at an elementary school, and I used to play with the Edmonton Eskimos. Well, in the Maritimes, my whole family is from here. My mother's from Halifax. I've got aunts and uncles in Lunenburg. My father was from Yarmouth, and I attended St. Mary's University. So I've spent a lot of time here, and my brother-in-law also lives in Kentville, so we're back here pretty regular, either every year or every other year. We spend time back in the Maritimes. It's our, home away from home. Well, I came to St. Mary's in 1973 from St. Catharines, Ontario, where I played my high school at Dennis Morris High School, and was recruited by Al Keith, who was then the head coach for the St. Mary's Huskies. And fortunately for me, football has always ended up being very successful with the teams I've been on, and we won a national championship at St. Mary's the first year I played in 1973. 1974, we went back to the Atlantic Bowl, won the Atlantic Conference, but were defeated, and fought for the championships in other years as well. So been very, very fortunate to played for St. Mary's when the program was really strong, and we had great players and good people. Unfortunately, we've had cancer in our family for a long time. My father passed away when he was 42, which was, I believe, in 1967 from cancer. And then in the last few years, unfortunately, we've had even more run-ins with it. My brother-in-law, Vince, my sister's husband, passed away from, a rare type of cancer, and then 2 years later, but diagnosed at the same time as my brother-in-law, my sister, who fought cancer for 2 years very valiantly, passed away in January of 2012. And then a year after that, I got a B-cell lymphoma and ended up fighting for about 7-8 months through treatments and an operation and cancer. And fortunately for me, though, I had a type that was caught early enough and is one that can be beaten. And so fortunately, I did beat it at this point, and now I'm in the routine of, the annual checkup, and they give you 1% back every year, and hopefully after 5 years, they'll say you're 100% cancer-free. Well, for me, and I just mentioned, was my sister Sandy. I don't know if I could ever fight cancer as valiantly as she did. She was unbelievably remarkable. When they found it in her, she was 4th stage already and completely riddled. And the doctors kept, she had bone cancer, and they kept saying, she must be in terrible pain, and yet she never was. So fortunately, even though she was completely riddled, skull, spinal column, back, everything was riddled, she didn't go through horrific pain and suffering, which was, extremely fortunate. And at no time in ever speaking to Sandy through the 2-year battle of her fight with cancer did you ever feel she wasn't going to be here, because she never spoke to you like she wasn't going to be here. She always spoke to you of her plans and of her future and the things she wanted to get done, and some of them were 3 years away and 2 years away. Even though she knew that she was not going to get there, she never ever talked any other way but that she would be there and she would accomplish those. And And her last 2 years were absolutely amazing. I mean, she traveled 10 times to various locations, Machu Picchu, where she climbed the mountains there, and you know, when she shouldn't even have been walking it, never mind climbing it. She went to Mexico and did some diving, snorkeling with me. She went to Vancouver, she went to Arizona, she went everywhere. She did more trips, she came to the Maritimes, she visited friends across the country and did some amazing things rather than just waiting for things to happen. So I would say she brought huge smiles and made my fight easier, because other than the first couple of months when we didn't know what my diagnosis was, and that was sort of, you know, the worry time. Once I got the diagnosis, I knew that I just had to go through the treatment and things would be fine. So mine was not quite as difficult a fight as hers was, because she knew that no matter what she did, she was just prolonging time. And so hers was a much different battle. Well, I mean, it is an ordeal. It is hard and it is difficult, but you know that. I mean, that's why when you hear that word, everybody shudders, and because, oh my gosh, here we go. But I mean, it is like anything. It's a process, and you just, you know, you can't change things that are there, so you have to accept them. And the faster you can accept where you are and whatever that is your condition is, and whatever the fight will have to be for you and the choices you make, the better it will be. Because I've watched, I mean, who isn't touched by cancer today and doesn't have friends or associates or family members that are going through this fight? And I've watched the remarkableness of my sister Sandy, and this, you know, like I say, I would only aspire to have half the strength she had to go through her battle. And I've also watched a friend who basically quit and spent the last 6, 8, 9 months never leaving his house, and it was extremely hard on him, and it was extremely hard on his family. So, you know, you've got to make the best of every situation, and that's just an old tip for any kind of thing you have, you know, trial and tribulation that you have to face, and then move on. I mean, get the best you can and the most you can, and do the most you can with what you've got and whatever your situation is. I mean, that would be all I could suggest, because otherwise it will be, I mean, it's depressing anyway, because, I mean, let's face it, cancer is depressing. It's something that you have to deal with, and there's lots of single times when you know, it's in your head and you have to deal with that. And hopefully you'll have friends and family and support networks that will assist you when those times get extremely hard. And then the rest of it, a lot of it is your ability to stay positive and just say, okay, this is what it is, this is what I've got to deal with, and let's deal with it. So she did the Rosanna Donna, you know, and I mean, that would be the character I remember the most, and would laugh the most with when I saw her. I mean, how could you not? You know, I mean, it was funny. It was a funny role and a funny bit. There was somebody who made us laugh, you know, and became a beloved character to millions through her work and the type of comedy that she did, and the foundation now that has started up in her name is attempting to fill a void in the sort of cancer spectrum of health, you know, to assist people and how to deal with it and get through it on the emotional, social level versus the physical and the challenges. And so, I mean, I mean, let's face it, we all know that if you can laugh, it makes life easier. And I mean, lots of times you laugh in situations which, for outsiders looking in, they'd be kind of, what are you doing? But for those of you that are dealing with those situations, the best thing to do is to be able to laugh at the situation, because if you can't, then you're going to be depressed. And there's no point in being depressed, because it's not going to change anything other than how much worse you're going to feel. So if you can see the humorous side of life, even when you are facing severe challenge like cancer, then you're going to find it's going to be an easier road for you. It's never easy, but it can be easier. Yeah, and I mean, you find it all the time, right, when you're in situations. If you can do it and you can make light of it, it sure makes it easier for everybody, you know. And why not? I mean, things are heavy enough just when you're dealing with the topic of cancer and the consequences and what you're going through. So, I mean, anything that will lighten it up a bit and make it easier on everybody involved has got to be a good thing. I have a strength that way. I don't know where it comes from or why I have it, but you know, I don't worry. I mean, when I found out I had it, well, I didn't find out I had it. I knew when I found the testicle that had the B-cell lymphoma on it that I knew right then this had to be cancer. I was leaving the next morning for the Maritimes for a trip here to visit Angelo in Kentville. So I knew I wasn't going to see a doctor for at least a week. So I just told Louise about it, and when I got to the Maritimes, I booked an appointment to see my doctor. But I didn't worry about it, because I can do that. I can shut it out and say, okay, there's nothing I can do now for the next week or two till I see the doctor, so then I can leave it. And it wasn't until I got back from my trip, and it was the night before I was going to see the doctor, that it comes back and I start thinking, well, I mean, you think about it fleetingly, but I can just push it aside. And then I looked it up, and it was pretty much knew from what I looked up there was no other thing. It could be butt cancer, because there was no other suggestion butt cancer. It's just a matter of what type of cancer. And even though my doctor the next day said, well, Hector, we're not 100, and I said, okay, I said, let's call a spade a spade. You know, the fact that I'm seeing the urologist on Monday in 2 days, you know, and I know why I'm going there in 2 days and why I wouldn't get in normally for a year. You know, so anyway, so I wasn't too bad, because I'm fairly strong that way, and until I know things, I don't spend a lot of time worrying about it, because I can't change it anyway. So I knew, you know, this could be bad, but I even went, you know, even after I had my operation, it was confirmed 2 days later, and what I already knew I knew. And I was having an operation. My big concern was I was going diving in a month, and, you know, I was going diving whether I found the worst or the best. But even after the operation, I'm still planning to, and I did go diving, even though I had an open wound and I had to cover it and do all the rest, because who knew, at this point, we still didn't know whether this would be my last dive trip or not. But I was going diving because, well, if it's going to be my last one, I'm not going to cancel it and miss it. So, you know, I've always been fortunate enough to be strong like that, and not need a lot of outside confirmation. I mean, I had Louisa, and at that point my family had gone through hell for 3 years in a row with 3 deaths in family members, and 2 through cancer. So the last thing I wanted to do was worry everybody about it. So we've just, until we knew the facts, we were just keeping it to ourselves, and that's what we did for the first couple of months, until we didn't want to go to them with worries, because then they would worry, and they are worriers. Whereas I can just leave it, and in a month, you know, I went on my trip. Didn't worry about it too much on my trip, because they weren't going to be able to tell me. I did know, though, before I went on the trip, that it wasn't what they thought. I had a 95% chance of being I think it's called a germ cell tumor, which is fairly routine, and once you get it done, it's finished and you're done. And I hit the 5%, and you know, but at that point, all they had was, it's not quite what we expected, but they couldn't give me definitive information. It had to be done more tests, and so then I left. And so there's nothing I could do until I got back from diving, and I wasn't going to know for 2 weeks. So, you know, I didn't worry about it. I went for my diving, did my thing, and came back. Well, I think what's important is, if you don't have the support family and you don't have the resources, and not everybody, you know, does, then you do have that. You have that ability, you know, to go and sit with people that have been through it and hear their stories. And first of all, for some, it's important to know they're not alone, that there's others have gone through it, and this is how they battled it, and these are the things they faced. And for some people, that's important. If you you know, never gone through these kinds of things, you know, you don't know what to expect, and you're worried about it. And if you're a worrier, I mean, and some people worry a lot about, you know, everything. So then that would be a huge help to them, and just to know that others felt the same way. That's why sometimes I feel, you know, that I can be not the best resource, because I don't worry about those things. I just deal with them. But so many don't. So many are terrified. I have a very good friend I went to school with who's going through cancer right now herself, and hers, we don't know the final prognosis yet, because she's still in the battle and had surgery, and so far it's gone fairly well, but she had a difficult time, and so I would call her and sort of be a support group and send her emails once in a while and just, you know, try and pick her spirits up, because she does have a good support system. But despite having the good support system, she still struggled. She had depression. She found it difficult to work, and she didn't work, and she found it, you know, very hard because she was so flattened by the news of it herself. So I think in her case, having a network like this would have helped her, because she would have had people to talk to that were going through the same kind of thing. And I tried to assist her as much as I could and call once in a while when, you know, she sounded down, and just try to pick her up a bit. And, you know, and she's you know, it took her probably 6 or 8 months to get through that phase, but she's better now. I mean, even though she still doesn't have all the answers, she's still battling and taking treatments, and I think actually she's finished now her chemo, but she's, you know, still doesn't know for sure where it's going to go, and because it's not a type of cancer that like mine, which once they got rid of it, it was gone. Hers is still, she's got some lymph nodes, and, you know, that whole sort of more steps to come kind of thing. So, but she's at least now in a better place in her head, and more positive, and nothing's changed except for she's not as depressed about it, and she's learned that it's not the end of the world yet. And so, you know, let's get the most out of things versus the least. So I think the support group in her case would have been very good, because if she could have met regularly with people struggling with the same thing and shared some of these emotions and these feelings, when you're in that space, it's nice to know it's not just you. Because sometimes you think it's just you that's going through this, and you're weak, and you're not being able to handle it well, and it isn't anything to do with weak or strength. It's what you're going through. And it's good sometimes to just be able to share what you're going through with others that are going through it and can relate to it. And you say, okay, well, you know, maybe I'm not as bad off as I thought, because others are fighting and struggling the same way. You know, so that would be very reassuring and comforting, and perhaps assist people in getting better faster. Well, I believe one of the things that assisted me greatly was the experiences I did have, even going back as far with my father, and then a couple of other relatives that passed away. I did, you know, vigils at the hospitals overnight, and even being able to ask them a question that it's funny. People have a very difficult time with death, and they're afraid to ask anything. And I remember Louise's uncle, I just said to him one day, you know, I was visiting him when he was dying, and I said, well, how are you feeling about it? Oh, I'm okay. I said, no. I said, how are you feeling about dying? Like, you know, how, because the Italians, they don't ask. It's just, you don't broach that. Well, once he knew what I was asking, he talked for an hour straight. I barely said a word, because no one had asked him how he was feeling about that. And he just needed someone to spill it all out, and he talked about his life, and, you know, I just retired 5 years ago, and I feel like I've been cheated, and, you know, he just was able to get a lot out. And even in the waiting room, I can remember, you know, he was sliding and drooling, and everybody was kind of pretending it wasn't happening, because no one wants to, and I just walked over and picked him up and sat him up and cleaned him up, and people would come to me and say, well, you know, maybe a miracle will happen. And I said, no. There's no miracle. I said, your uncle, this man is going to pass soon. I said, if you've got to talk to him, do it now. Don't be afraid to ask. He wants to hear it. You know, everybody's walking on kids' gloves for him. So being informed through experience like that, and then with Sandy, one of the things you learn is you need to write everything down that you can think of that you want to know from your doctor, because when you're with the doctor, it's very, very difficult to ask those questions, because you don't remember them, and you only get your small window with your doctor. So having anything you think of, you should always have a pad and write questions down that you want answers for, so that when you are with your doctor and you are nervous, because it is a nerve-wracking time when you're getting information and sharing, but then you can refer to it and you can get the questions. And for those of you that are not afraid of it, the internet is a valuable piece. I used it, looked up everything there was. Now, did I know whether it was accurate or not? Not 100%, of course not. but I knew that at least I had a background. I knew what the doctor, and when I went to see the doctor the first time, rather than him to have to start with, well, this is a cell, and and give me every single detail and spend an hour giving me that, once I had informed him that I had looked up basics, we could then get, and he could tell me things, and then I could relate that to what I had looked up, and fortunately in my case, pretty much to a T, what I had looked up was relevant, and the stage I was at, and the different categories of cancer thing they had for me were bang on, and so it was an easier conversation because I had already done background, and he confirmed what I had looked up, or would have said, no, this isn't accurate, but because I wasn't giving him what I had, I was listening to what he was telling me and learning from him as well. So I think that helped me face it, because I knew what I was going there for. I'd looked up what it was about. I'd looked up where it could be, whether it's first, second, third, fourth, the different things, the tests they do, the things I could check and relate to see would I be fitting in this category or this category. So it made everything easier for us, and I think easier for me to live with and understand. And then when I did have questions, I could base them on something I had, rather than just some information I'd heard 13 seconds before and now tried to assimilate and understand. So I think it's extremely important that you become as informed as you can about the information, and then it'll make your conversations with the doctors easier for everybody. Hello, my name is Hector Pothier. I'm a former Edmonton Eskimo, St. Mary's University football player, and a cancer survivor.